Good morning, everybody. Hello, it's 10:03, and we're going to get started because we have a virtual audience throughout the state of California watching us. Isn't that exciting? Let's everyone clap for our virtual audience. Woo! We want to be sure to include them today, so we'll be doing a lot of these silly types of things throughout the day. So thank you for being here. We're delighted to host our 4th annual, which is scary, Inclusion Collaborative State Conference. And it sounds like, can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Steve almost says yes. I have to talk with my teacher voice. So I'm Kathy Wall. Thank you all for being here. I'm the director of the Inclusion Collaborative, and I want to thank all my staff, which, you know, if we get to Friday, we'll be really happy to all be standing. And we're excited that everyone's here. And our first day is today, although actually it starts tomorrow, but you're here for your pre-conference event, which is our Preschool Inclusion Day. And it is my great honor to welcome our Superintendent of Santa Clara County Office of Education, Mr. John Gundry. He's going to welcome us.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Kathy. I want to say, first of all, thanks to you for all the effort. She told me that she's exhausted and we're just starting. So they've got a long road for the next 3 days, but thank you for the great work they've done in organizing this event, Kathy and her staff. Welcome to those of you who are here in person, and for those of you who are participating virtually in this event today and over the next 3 days. I'm really proud that our office sponsors this annual event. I think that it's part of our responsibility as a county office of education to do this work and to assist all of you who do the work directly with kids and families in making sure that you provide the best services that you possibly can for those kids. This is also, those of you who know me know that this is also something that's very personal to me because I have a nephew with a profound disability that my sister and her husband have been dealing with for the last 15 years. When he was he has a disease called Pompe disease. It's a genetic disorder related to muscular dystrophy. And when he was diagnosed, he was almost a year old when he was diagnosed. They said his life expectancy was 2 to 3 years. He turned 15 in July, and it's been quite a long journey for my sister and her husband. He's their only child. And so this has become their life. And I remember when they didn't know at the beginning that they even had any services available through the school district. When he became school age, I had to call them up and say, well, yes, you do. And here's what you do and what you can expect. So for me and my family, this is personal. It's also important to me professionally. And I thank you for the great work that you do. And welcome to Santa Clara County. And for those of you online, welcome to the collaborative. Thank you. Oh, and I want to say one thing. I want to personally thank Charmaine Warmanhoven. Charmaine has been donating her personal resources, her foundation resources to the collaborative for 11 years. Thank you to Charmaine for her long commitment to the Inclusion Collaborative. She is an integral part of what we're doing here today, so thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next welcome is Sheila Self, who is our 619 California representative coordinator from the state of California Department of Education. So I'm going to let you go over here so the cameras will find us. Thank you, Sheila.
Okay, am I in the right spot now?
You are, and you have to talk really loud.
Okay.
And everyone here in the back. Yes.
Yeah?
Okay.
Am I good? Okay. So hello, my name is Sheila Self. I work for the California Department of Education, Special Education Division, and as Kathy said, I'm the 619 coordinator for the state. So I want to welcome you to the 2017 Inclusion Conference, and specifically our pre-conference today for preschool, sponsored by the California Department of Education. Each year we come together as teachers, administrators, and colleagues to this conference as a touch point to the work that we do throughout the year. The CDE values these opportunities for professional learning and hopes that each of you come away with a new idea, technique, or tool that you can apply to your work. The conference mission is to support inclusion for each child, and I have been a vocal advocate. I am a little vocal for those of you who know me, a vocal advocate for inclusion. The CDE sees all children as general education children first. And through high expectations, effective teaching, and a positive school culture, all children will thrive. I want to tell you a story about myself and an experience I had last week that challenged my thinking about inclusion. So I went on a field trip, and I went to a county office of education, El Dorado County Office of Education, and I visited a kindergarten classroom, and I also had the privilege of visiting a high school classroom. So let me tell you what I saw and what my experience was. First off, kindergarten classroom. It was a self-contained classroom. All children there had autism. However, there was high-quality instruction, effective teaching, academically oriented. They were writing, they were counting, they were doing sensory activities, they were collecting data, they were reinforcing behaviors, they had a sketch. I mean, it was a well-oiled machine, and every child was engaged. Now, I have to say, I haven't visited many quiet preschool classrooms. So this was a little bit of an anomaly for me. But every child was so engaged, and the program was so well developed and targeted for these children with autism that it was just incredible. They were using language strips to communicate. They had, it was just incredible. Let me just stop there because I could go on. So the next visit we had was to high school. So we go in there. It's a self-contained classroom. What kind of field trip am I on? So within that high school setting, there were multiple children with multiple disabilities in there. The teacher with the infamous whiteboard was well-dressed, had a tie on, professional, and he just oozed that professionalism. He had every student engaged. They were coming up, they were moving, they were engaged in their learning. There were appropriate supports within the classroom. Once again, it was a phenomenal experience. Many of them were starting to go into other classrooms where they had specific strengths, whether it was English or other activities. So I have to tell you that this old gal who has seen many a special education situation throughout my career was really blown away in a very positive way. I couldn't have been more pleased. And why is that? Since we're at an inclusion conference, what in the world is she talking about, right? And really, it's about this. It's about high quality instruction, high expectation, positive classroom environment, school culture, engagement of students, and what happens when you put all those puzzle pieces together, you have children who are achieving and meeting those goals for their families, for themselves, for college and career readiness. Now, after that experience, there was one more piece that was kind of a kicker. My friend and colleague out of the University of Colorado had sent me a video. And this video was a conversation between two women who had been in high school together, both having autism, and now they're 25 years old, and they're having this conversation. And they were talking about kind of what tripped them up back then, what they had done through the next couple of years as they were adulting, and kind of what those outcomes were looking like for them, what their hopes and dreams were. Once again, I was blown away because they have the same hopes and dreams that everybody in this room has. And sometimes we get kind of sometimes I get kind of bogged down in the disability and not really lifting up the person as much as I need to do. So I just want to be transparent about that and let you know I had a big experience last week. And I really had to reflect on that and think about that because the pendulum can swing here and the pendulum swings there, but you need to have a little balance. So I'm very pleased to be here today. I want to welcome you to the pre-conference on preschool. I think you're going to experience a showcase of some wonderful best practices. We are going to be talking about linking foundations to assessment, to what you do with that report to inform instruction, and then what kind of teaching practices are going to be most effective. So, once again, from the California Department of Education, I want to welcome you to the 2017 Inclusion Conference. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Sheila. We appreciate that. We have another welcome. Dr. Jennifer Shantz will be coming up to join us. She is an early learning advisory consultant for the Office of Special Education, OSEP. Before she comes up, I probably didn't give your title correct because I don't have my readers on. But before we get started with Jennifer, she's going to share a lot of what's going on the national level. But I wanted to make sure everyone knows that there are bathrooms in this building. They're that way, and they're that way. Does everyone have their necklace on? Orange, good. And does everyone have their app hooked up? Okay, if you don't know how to do it, there are little table cards on your table. We also have a help desk in our lobby. So if there's any other housekeeping issues that you might need, we are wearing these shirts, okay? You can't miss us. So thank you for being here. Thank you, Jennifer.
Great, well, thank you. And I am Jennifer Shantz. Let's see, how do I move the slides? There we go. And because I am a visual learner, I brought slides and I love the t-shirts. That helps me so much. I can find when I need help who I need to talk to. I am thrilled to be here. I am from the Office of Special Education Programs at the U.S. Department of Education, and bring welcome from our office. I want to just mention that this is, I think, the third year you've had someone from our office.
Well, we had Ruth Ryder virtually.
Oh, Ruth was virtual.
So the third time in person.
In person, okay. So we're thrilled to be here, and just to mention that we are really excited about the work you're doing. We're excited that there's a focus on inclusion, and the fact that I stand before you is no small thing. Our travel budget is really tight, so the fact that they sent me out here is a good thing, a good message that I wanted to just share. So I come to this topic with a passion. I am a former preschool special ed teacher from rural Georgia and worked really hard for many years, this was over 20 years ago, to find partners, to find early childhood programs where we could include our kiddos in. So even though it was 20 years ago, I know how hard this work is, and was able to find my passion through policy and research. And so what I hope to do in 20 minutes was just to share, oh, thank you.
It's easier.
High tech. Was just share a little bit, just to ground us in the conversation and share a little bit about what we know from the research base. And I know I'm going to be preaching to the choir a little bit here, but I always think it's really important to start with kind of what do we know, and also share a little bit about our national data that we collect around preschool environments and where kiddos are being served. Then I'm going to share some highlights from our joint statement that we issued a couple years ago with HHS on early childhood inclusion. And then Kathy asked specifically that I talk about our preschool LRE DCL. I'm going to get very federal on you, bureaucratic, but I will break that all down. And then finally, just share a few resources. I'm sure you're well aware of these, but in case you're not, just make sure you know about these things that exist. So what do we know about early childhood inclusion? Again, I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but we know from the research base that inclusion benefits kids with and without disabilities. We know that if it's done right, families have very positive views about inclusion. We know that when it's done right, children with disabilities can learn in inclusive settings and do learn, and can learn with individualized instruction a vast majority of their skills and development. So what do we know from the database? We, at the federal level, collect what we call preschool environments data. How many of you are familiar with this data and know it inside and out and actually report it for your district? So, I know, the federal data collection, right? Well, this is kind of the one or the two data points that we have, and we've struggled with how best to collect this given the variety across states in terms of what's available in regular early childhood programs, but there are kind of two pieces to what we look at. The first one, and this is what we call indicator 6A, is the percent of children who attend a regular early childhood program and receive the majority of their special education and related services in that program. And nationally, we know that 45% of children, and again, this is children ages 3 through 5, so we know that it captures some kindergarten age kids, which is a little different, and we don't have a way to break that down, but so keep that in mind. 45% of the kiddos receive their services in their regular education setting. And on the flip side of that, indicator 6B, is the percent of children who attend what we would call more of that segregated setting and receive their services there. And we know that nationally, 3 through 5-year-olds, 25% of them are there. And here's a little visual to show there is a little bit of variability across the states. Colorado is kind of a leader in this area. This is indicator 6A, so these are the kids that are attending a regular early childhood program and receiving their special services in that setting. And it looks like California is kind of right in the middle. And then 6B, this is where the percent of kids, 3 through 5, who are receiving services in their segregated setting. And again, there's variability across the states. Looks like California is falling right in the middle. And if you want to see California's data, I'm sure Sheila could share it with you. She probably has more updated data. And we also have it on this link where you can search state by state if you're curious. So we know that inclusion works. We know that we could do better when looking at the data, that only 45% of our kiddos are receiving services in a regular ed setting. So a couple of years ago, we had been working really closely with our colleagues at HHS, issuing some joint statements on issues that were really critical to early care and education. And so we thought, well, could we do one on inclusion? And this is a list of all of our joint documents that we released. And if you're sticking around and here tomorrow, I'm going to be talking more about the first one on suspension and expulsion. But the inclusion one we released in September of 2015. I encourage you to take a look at all of these because I think kids with disabilities are reflected across all of them, and all of these different topic areas are really important to our population. And you can access them. I have a link it later, but we have an early learning webpage on our ed.gov site where you can access all of these documents. And generally, the purpose of these documents were to raise awareness on a particular issue around early childhood, review the research base, and if there was a legal foundation for the issue, provide recommendations for both at the state level and for local programs if they wanted to kind of move forward on any of these issues, and then to identify and disseminate free resources that exist for those of you in the field who are working really hard on these issues. So how many of you have seen the joint document on inclusion? Great, and one of the things, I have a copy of it if anybody wants to take a look at it later, but one of the things we're really curious about is if state and local programs have used that document to kind of take a step forward on inclusion. So later, if you have time to come up to me and tell me a story about how you've used it, would really love to hear your feedback on what's been helpful around that piece. We're hearing that states have been able to take some steps forward by using this resource. And so we're really excited to hear that a piece of paper can help change things and move things along. So if you're not familiar with the joint document, really what it does is it underscores kind of what we're talking about, that children with disabilities should have access, young children with disabilities should have access to high quality inclusive settings where they can receive their supports and services so that they can meet high expectations. And one of the things that we believe is that, we're setting the trajectory for young children in the early childhood years. And so if we start with inclusion, there's a higher likelihood that throughout their lives, they'll be able to stay in inclusive environments and wind up in life in an inclusive community. And so that was kind of the moral thinking behind the statement. The other two things that I think were significant with the statement is we identified and talked about a high-quality early childhood program as being inclusive. And I think different entities have talked about this way, but the first time at the federal level we actually stated that, I think was a really important piece, that if you're talking about a high-quality program, then it is inclusive. Most children that walk into that classroom can have their needs met if it's done well. The other piece that we highlighted was how important robust partnerships are. An early childhood center cannot do this alone. Special ed folks cannot do this alone. We need to work together in order to make this happen, and families play a very key role in all of this. So if you look at the document, we actually outlined considerations for states to think about in terms of taking steps forward. I'm not going to walk through all of these, but just to highlight a couple, and there's a lot more underneath all of these in the actual document. But really, thinking about creating at the state level, a state-level interagency task force focused on inclusion, and we know that that's happened in many states. Another one that I think is really important is the data piece. So understanding your data at the local level or the state level on where kids are receiving services, and not making any judgments on that, but trying to dig deeper so that you can do some program improvement around the data. What are the data telling you, and how can you dig into it? And the two pieces of data I put up are really just the beginning. There's so much more behind those data sets, and so much of it depends on the local context. And so really having a mechanism to be able to understand your data so that you can decide who needs more support when. Really being creative about your resources. One other thing I wanted to mention, because I know there's been some work in California about quality rating and improvement systems, is there a place at the state level to think about inclusion in QRIS systems? And we know that states have really struggled with this, but there are examples of some states that have done some interesting things around their quality rating and improvement systems work. One other piece that is really important, and one thing I'm really passionate about, is focusing on social emotional development and providing more TA and resources for local programs around that. Because what's the number one thing we hear from local programs is inclusion doesn't work when you have a kid with challenging behaviors. And we know that programs need a lot more support in that space. And then just raising public awareness, having more conversations with people, opening that door to understand what their concerns are is really important. There's a set for early childhood programs of recommendations that really follow along with those state level ones. Again, I'm not going to read through each of these, but I think the bottom line is really around collaboration, and the focus should really be on that IEP or IFSP team, and their decision making should be based on that individual child's needs. So again, before I move on to the next piece, I just want to reiterate that I would love to hear if anybody has used the policy statement in any way to kind of move or start conversations in your community or at the state level. It would be great to hear any feedback. So another piece that we realized we could do was we had this thing called the Preschool LRE DCL, which is the Preschool Least Restrictive Environment Dear Colleague Letter. And the department puts out these Dear Colleague letters. It is a form of kind of informal guidance to help states really think through different issues that they were struggling with. And so we had released the Dear Colleague letter back in 2012, and we decided it was time to re-release it. And so I don't know if any of you have seen, there were last week a whole lot of attention around documents that we had rescinded. So I'm here to tell you that the 2012 one was rescinded, but that's because we had the 2017 version, which was more updated. So the 2017 version is still on the books, on the record, still exists. So just to, if anybody has questions about that, yeah. There was a lot of confusion around the rollout of that, but what they tried to do was just pull down things that were old and not relevant, and kind of clean house a little bit around those pieces. So the Preschool LRE Dear Colleague letter really focuses on the LRE requirements and just reiterates that the LRE requirements under the IDEA do apply to preschoolers, and that when kids are when you're looking at placement decisions for preschoolers, really having the conversation about when you're removing a kid from a regular education environment, that it happens only when supplementary aids and services cannot meet the needs of the child in that setting. And I always like to point this one out, that there is language around technical assistance being provided to local entities around this piece, which is really tough, but there are a lot of resources available that I'll talk a little bit more about. So there's what it looks like. Here's where you can access it. And so the updated Dear Colleague letter really has these different pieces. It goes over the key statutory and regulatory requirements, basically what I just had on the earlier slide. It talks about preschool placement options, because we know the context of preschool is different than K-12. And so thinking about that. We had a lot of questions around the reporting requirements, so that data that I showed earlier, what is the definition of a regular early childhood setting? Is a library, convening considered a regular early childhood? So we tried to provide some guidance around the reporting piece. And then we had lots of questions about funding. And so we added that to it as well. So again, the Dear Colleague letter really just reaffirms that our belief that most children should be educated with their same age peers in inclusive settings, and that the decision should be made at the individual child level and among that IEP team. Okay, so resources, so that I get through my time. So one of the things that I wanted to mention is as we were putting these policy pieces out, we also wanted to pay attention to providing resources for states and local programs who wanted to move forward on this. We know that times are tough, budgets are often strapped, and so what can we provide with our limited funding to help out? And one of the things we did, and I know it's small, but if you haven't seen, on our early learning page on ED's website, we have a button called Inclusion, and you can click on there and find the LRE document, you can find the joint policy statement, and some other resources linking to our TA centers. One of the things we're working on right now, with the help of interns, we have some doctoral student interns, which are fabulous, that are helping us out, are some case studies of states that are making some progress in this area. And that's something that we're hoping we'll be able to put up there in probably the first of the year, but it really just gives examples of what steps states are taking in order to try and kind of address this issue, because it's really tough. I know you guys probably all know about, we had nothing to do with this, but I like to put it up there because I think it's really important that DEC and NAYC put out a joint statement many years ago about preschool inclusion. It's a great resource, particularly when you're going out and working in regular early childhood settings, to say, hey, look, our field thinks this is important. And then our Early Childhood Technical Assistance Center, which we call ECTA. How many of you have heard of ECTA? Great. If it is, their audience is predominantly states, but there are a lot of resources on here that are really good for local programs. They have an inclusion page. It's actually their LRE page that has a lot of great resources. One of the things that they did, and I think I have it on the next slide, is hosted a bunch of webinars with technical assistance centers that really predominantly work with childcare and Head Start, all around this topic area. If you didn't participate and you don't know about those, you can find those resources. A lot of those webinars are really good to share locally with other staff, and it's really talking about local issues. I think there was one webinar that was particularly focused on Head Start and some of the struggles that Head Start programs were engaging in, and so, take a look at them clearly. Review them before you share widely in your community, but to see if they're relevant, but they were really good resources. The other thing ECTA is doing currently is working with a group of 6 states to work more closely around steps they can take around inclusion. And one of the things that they decided to do, and it was from input from the states, was to take the recommendations that were listed in the joint statement document and actually ask and create a self-assessment tool almost. So if you want to make progress on, creating a state-level interagency team, where are you on that, and what steps could you take? And it would really be a self-assessment tool to kind of guide where the state wants to move and where they want to put their energy. I believe that is up on the ECTA site now, and I think there are going to be some additional resources being developed. Another thing is that we just, every 5 years, we recompete these big technical assistance centers. And I'm happy to report that we have funded ECTA again. And the new center is going to be starting up in January. And they have a whole lot of specific, I have to look at my cheat sheet here, sorry, activities that they will be engaged in around inclusion, because we actually ask them to pay more attention to inclusion to help kind of, again, move the field forward in this area. One of the things they're going to be developing, which I think many of you could find useful, is developing indicators of high quality inclusion. And they're going to do that at the state level, the district level, and the local program level. And so, where do you see high quality inclusion and what does it look like? What are the indicators that exist there? And so we're really excited about that. They're also going to be developing some more tools for to help raise awareness for families in early childhood programs. So a set of resources that you could take when you want to do some public awareness campaign around inclusion that you could take and share with families, share with other early childhood programs. They're going to do a TED Talk series around inclusion, preschool inclusion, and bring in some of the experts in this field to do that. And then they're going to work more targeted and intensively with states around this issue for states that are interested in kind of changing their data and moving forward on that piece. So I'm happy to talk about that anymore. I think I have, here's the webinar series I mentioned. You can get to it either from ECTA's website or from our website. And then one more quick thing, because I am the project officer for another new TA center we have just funded that focuses on social, emotional, and behavioral development. We actually asked that with this TA center, there's a focus on inclusion because, again, we know that many programs struggle with kids with behavioral issues. And so they're going to be working on a lens and have a whole set of activities focused on inclusion. And if you know the folks who do the pyramid model, which is, some people know them as the Cephal people or the taxi people or the pyramid folks. Those are the folks that are going to be working on this technical assistance center. And that is starting next month. And if you want to hear more about that center, I'll be talking about it in the breakout session tomorrow. So with that, back. What did I do? Sorry.
It's okay.
There we go. Okay, great.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jennifer. Isn't she amazing? And it's very exciting to hear what's coming up next. So I say we should all try to meet that woman sometime today and shake her hand. Poor thing, she's going to be tired. My next speaker who is going to welcome us today is Kristin Brooks, and she is the Director of Supporting Inclusive Practices Project with CDE, coordinated with Santa Clara County Office of Ed. It's hard to say all that, isn't it? But at any rate, we are going to have questions at the end, and when we take questions, if you have them pertaining to a specific person, we will have them come up here and take care of that. So welcome, Kristin.
Thank you. I'm going to skip out of this real quick because I changed one slide just slightly.
Oh, everyone look over there.
I know. Look away.
Look away. Go away.
All right.
There we go.
Thank you, Kathy. So can you guys hear me in the back? All right, thank you so much. Get the thumbs up. So before I start, and actually I'm kind of wrapping you guys up, right? You've been welcomed a few times this morning, but just want to give another applause to Kathy Wall, to Kim Bavario, to the entire Inclusion Collaborative staff team. They're fantastic, so excellent. So as Kathy mentioned, my name is Kristin Brooks. I'm a director of supporting inclusive practices, which Jennifer mentioned states are looking at technical assistance and how to provide that technical assistance to at the local level, state and local level, and that's exactly what I do. So least restrictive environment, preschool to third grade. We work with approximately 32 districts across California toward that effort, so it's been fantastic work. So I live in Southern California, I work for Santa Clara, but I also work for CDE, and also in the house I have to recognize my preschool peeps over here, Dr. Samantha Pelletieri and Christina Daffron, who lead in this work as well in Southern California. So if you guys have a chance to see their panel presentation, please attend that following this session. So in kind of preparing for this morning, I thought, what do you want to say to folks? You guys are going to get a lot of information. What are some takeaways? What are some things that when you leave a conference, you think, I remember that. That struck a chord with me. So that's what I prepared for you this morning, just a few slides of some things that I'm hoping are really takeaways for you. And so this first slide is a visual of the heavy work, the heavy lifting that we're doing for building and sustaining preschools. Would you guys agree this is heavy work? Right? No matter where you work, this is heavy lifting because we're doing good and supportive work for students with the most significant needs, right? Early on. And as Jennifer mentioned, we got to get them early because our trajectory, if we start inclusion early, then that's the road they're hopefully going to be on for the duration of their school success. So this is us doing all the heavy lifting in our building and sustaining. This represents the Padlet, or a couple of Padlets that I have for you guys that are in the handouts there, but this is representative of all the information that you guys are going to get. You're going to have a plethora of resources that I think Kim posted on the app for everyone, and so you can access all of those great materials when you go back to the ranch. So this is representative of some of that. So some of the things that Jennifer mentioned are also on these Padlets. And this is kind of what those Padlets would look like. Here's all that great information. Again, when you go back to the ranch, here's everything you get. There's the Dear Colleague letter up there for you, Jennifer. So when we talk about, she was asking, how do these resources help support our work? That's one of those things that I wave around. I'm like, see, they said it again. They said it in 2012, and they said it again in 2017. We need to do this inclusion thing for our kids. And it's not a special ed thing. It's an education thing, right? We're talking about all of our kids. So just a little visual there are some of those resources that you guys can have access to. So I talked about going back to the ranch. So now what? 3 days of this conference, 3 days of talking about inclusion, 3 days of talking about what we need to do, about the data, about how our assessments inform our instruction. How do you make that all work, right? What's the first thing you do? If you don't have an inclusion program, if you don't have a plan, if you don't have a path, what are you gonna do when you get there? Is it just gonna go on your shelf? Here's another folder, another conference I went to, another CEU on my list. So I'm going to challenge you guys. I want to challenge you for the rest of your time at the Inclusion Collaborative at this conference to think about leadership is action, not position. And we are all leaders in this room. Even if you don't have your administrative credential, it doesn't mean you're not a leader. You are a leader in everything that you do. But remember, it's not just a position. And for a lot of us, it's not just a job. You go home because or you go to work because this means something to you. So I challenge you guys to take action on what you guys are going to talk about over the next 3 days, what you're going to share with your colleagues, the information that you're going to review. Take action. Take action. And start here. Please, please, please start here. Start with aligning your mission, your vision, your values, and your goals. Think about those mission statements that your districts, your school sites, your communities have worked so hard to create. Can you even recite those? What do those even say? What do they mean? Go back to those mission statements. Does it talk about all kids? Does it talk about inclusion? Does it talk about we're a great school for some kids, but not for all kids? So I challenge you to think about those mission statements because they do mean something. They're sending a message about your community. What's your vision? We talk about being in a better place than we are today, taking one step further, getting off that hamster wheel, right? The same thing over and over and over and over. Get off the wheel, be in a better place than we are today for our kids because they deserve it. What are our values? Do we value inclusion? Do we value high achievement and rigor for all kids? Maybe just some of our kids? All of our kids? Again, challenging those values and setting goals. We talk about this is hard, this inclusion thing is hard, behaviors are hard, funding is low, it's difficult. Have a goal, because if you write it down, you talk about it, you share it, you commit to it, you'll get there, starting somewhere. Here at the Santa Clara County Office of Education, we do kind of book studies, and one of the studies that we did with our leadership team was Barry Posner's The Leadership Challenge. And so I thought this was a great visual because this really helps start you on your process toward inclusion. Modeling the way. When you guys go back to the ranch and you talk about this conference that you went to, are you going to share that enthusiasm, share that modeling that inclusion is the way to go for our kids? Modeling the way, modeling the behavior, modeling the commitment to that end. Do you inspire a shared vision? Do you talk about lifting everybody up even when it's difficult, right? The heavy lifting. Persevering through the challenges that we may face, and inspiring that shared vision. Do you challenge the process, that what we're doing right now for kids isn't good enough? I get all choked up, right? Because it's just not good enough. Our kids deserve better. All of our kids deserve better. Do we enable others to act? Do we invite their opinions? Do we invite their participation as stakeholders, families and teachers and admin and community members alike? Do we enable them to act? Do we give them the authority to make something, to make a change, to make things better? And then do we encourage the heart and say, you know, this is difficult and you're doing a great job and our kids and our families appreciate it so much? Encouraging the heart. We also read a lot about Patrick Lencioni's work, if you guys are familiar with Patrick Lencioni, but this is a great conflict continuum that he shares. And if you see on the left, artificial harmony, that's where everybody goes to work every day and we say, this is a great place to work and I love my staff and everything's awesome. We never have any difficulties. And then on the whole other end of it, it's, I can't stand so-and-so in the cubicle next to me and I can't get my job done. And so you're trying to work through these difficult things in education and you want to have this balance, right? You're going to have those tough conversations, those courageous conversations about getting off that hamster wheel. So finding that ideal conflict point where you can talk about some of the struggles. Your gen ed teacher saying, you know what, I wasn't trained for this special ed thing. I'm pushing back. That's not what I signed up for, I'm pushing back. Your special ed staff who might say, I'm not letting my kids go into inclusion, these are my babies. So where do you have that ideal conflict where you can work through it? We often talk about if we're not having conversations about kids, we're having the wrong conversation, right? And if it's all about the adults, we are losing sight of the kids. So having that ideal conflict because we're doing what's right for kids. Tim Brown from Solution Tree says, every aspect of your school sends a message about your mission. You think that's true? Right? So go back, what do you believe in? What do you value? What are your goals? What's your vision? This one's much more powerful. Mike Maddow says, it's okay if you can't ensure high achievement for all students, but at least have the courage to change your mission statement so you aren't deceiving parents. Wow, how's that feel? Right? I thought the same thing. Remember I said I was going to share some takeaways with you because these are some of the things I've heard and seen and worked with that really stuck with me. And I thought, you know, this is so true. And kudos to Mr. Maddow for being able to say this in front of large groups of people who he doesn't have those personal relationships with. He's like, you know, get over yourself. Check your ego at the door. This is for kids. And if you can't do that, then go back and look at your mission statements and say, does it really say I can't ensure for all kids? Well, then don't put it in there, right? We're talking about all. We're not talking about the kids who we think are in the readiness model that can be included. We're talking about all kids. There is no readiness model, right? That's a myth. Doubt kills more dreams than failure ever will. Right? If you think you can't do it, you can't. If you don't have that growth mindset, you're done, right? Do you guys agree with this, right? You can also attribute that to your diets, right? I doubt I can stick with it. Okay, well, it's not going to happen then. New Year's resolutions are coming, right? And my dear friend and colleague, Dr. Aaron Studer from the Chime Institute says, we need to follow the Cortez model because we aren't going back. Once you're moving forward on that inclusion trajectory, don't call it a pilot program. We've had these discussions. We're not going back. We know that inclusion works for kids, and we don't need to go backwards, right? Keep persevering when it's difficult. When the funding's not there, when the staffing issues happen, when the families are struggling, persevere, because we're not going back. And always, 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 whatever you guys institute back at the ranch, look at your continuous improvement model. There are a lot of folks in here who are already doing it and doing it the right way, right? When we say the right, that always means just for kids. That's the right way. There's no one way to implement inclusion across every district. But constantly making a check. Are we doing it right? Are we looking at our assessments? Is it informing our instruction? Are we changing with the demographics of our kids? Are we changing with their needs, their individual needs? And are we planning together? Do we bring our general ed and our special ed to the table at the same time? And I often say, if you can't get your staff together, you can't get your kids together. So are you guys co-planning, co-collaborating, co-instructing, co-assessing, co-everything, co-co-co, because it's all about getting our kids together too. So these were just some of the little takeaways I wanted to share with you all. I'm very passionate about this work. Right now I work for Santa Clara as a director with all the districts, as I mentioned, but in my previous life, I worked with this amazing team in a Southern California district to create an inclusive preschool program back in 2005, grassroots effort. And it started with all of this. It started with the mission. It started with the vision, the values, and the goals. What do we want to do differently and better for our kids? Because they deserve that, right? And so they're constantly, and everybody that I work with is constantly in this continuous improvement process because we just want to keep that momentum going so we don't get stuck and go backwards. So burn those boats out there because we're not going back. So thank you very much. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you, Kristin, for inspiring us. And it really does come back to, it's all about the kids. Has everyone looked at our bookmark yet in your bag? I mean, just look at that every day. You're going to work for the kids. And I loved how you mentioned that if you can't find time to co-plan with the adults, then obviously there's going to be some issues with the kids. That's a great takeaway for me. We have a few minutes for questions. If anyone has any questions, any virtually, Dr. Golaher? No questions virtually. Any questions live? You're going to have to, I'll come to you. Cameramen, they have to move around a lot, so we have to move slow. Are you ready? Go.
I'm sick, so bear with me. My question is for Sheila Self. When she was talking about the gentleman in the classroom who had it all put together and he had the appropriate supports in the classroom, I'd like for you to elaborate what the appropriate supports are in the classroom.
Thank you. Sheila?
So what I observed in the classroom is there were probably 4 they had an interesting additional certificate training program for the paraprofessionals that would understand how to do discrete trials. I'm thinking more in the kindergarten, but and they had a transition plan to move to inclusive environments. Kindergarten, it wasn't like a one-stop shop for the rest. These were 2 snapshot examples. But I saw the people who were really like octopus. I mean, they were like collecting data, reinforcing kids, providing instruction all at the same time. So hopefully that answers your question, but it was really academic instruction. So. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, a gift of time. Isn't that exciting? I just want to announce for the people that are here in attendance in this room, raise your hand, everybody here. This room will be closing after this presentation, so take all your belongings with you. We had to do some deals with people in the building. And the rest of the conference for today will be in the Saratoga room, which is this way, the Oak Grove room, which is on the 2nd floor right above the Saratoga room, and the Morgan Hill room, which is on the 3rd floor right above all those other floors. So if you stomp really loud in the Morgan Hill room, they might hear you all the way down. So our next, thank you very much for our welcome, everybody. We really appreciate that. And we are going to go ahead and break now, and at 11:15, we start promptly with our next sessions. So I guess go to your appropriate rooms. Okay, thank you.